Praise Chapel Fresno, and all those of you tuning in. We appreciate you tuning in no matter what you're tuning in on, where you're tuning in at. We're just glad you're here with us this evening. Still going through the biblical bios or biographies that we're doing for some of the more notable characters in the Bible, and even those that aren't well known. Just going through that, I kind of really enjoyed doing Adam and Eve, got a lot of positive feedback from that, so I guess we'll keep digging in and get to know these people. Excuse me, my headset's messing up. But if you want to continue to give, continue to support this ministry, this move of God, you can do so via EasyTithe on your smartphone app. You can go to easytithe.com, search for Praise Chapel Fresno. You'll see which one you can give on. You can also go to praisechapelfresno.com, click give on the menu bar, and it's going to take you to a third-party website that we're contracted with, safe and secure to give on. And also, you can do so if you're joining us on our in-person services. Envelopes are behind each and every chair, and right outside the sanctuary is our tithes and offerings box, so you can give that way. Or if you're joining us on our online campus only, we appreciate you. If you want to continue to give, you can do so. And if you need to mail it in, you can just Google Praise Chapel Fresno, California. You'll see our address. You can ship it into there. We'll make sure it gets deposited in a timely manner. And again, shout out to all those that are even in our fellowship that have been reaching out to me and letting me know. I know, we've kind of been through this transition phase, and, getting a lot of support from you guys out there is always, really helpful, and to have different avenues that we can go to, for people that have experienced different things. But I just really appreciate all the support we've been getting through that from me personally. Have just been really helpful having, my people out there is just continuing to support, shoot it out there, saying great job, keep going, you're hitting it hard, spitting fire, things like that. Just always helpful, and I really appreciate it. So let's just get into this. So we're going to be talking about Noah. Today, he's right. I mean, it kind of just lines up because it gives the lineage of Adam to Noah. So it only makes sense that we would go from Adam and Eve into Noah, because he's just the most notable biblical character after that, aside from Cain and Abel. But Cain and Abel have this really short narrative in the Bible, and there's not a whole lot that we pull from that wouldn't differ from Adam and Eve. So I just felt we needed to kind of jump past that. What do we learn from that? Don't murder your brother. That's pretty much what we learned from that. But Noah, the biblical references of Noah is going to be Genesis 5:28 through 9:28. So he spans 4 chapters of the Bible. He's the 9th descendant of Adam. He's fathered by Lamech. Not a big deal. Don't need to know who those people were, except for Adam, of course. When he's named, his father claimed that Noah would be born and he would bring relief to all the work that they were having to do. So if you remember, Adam and Eve, they get kicked out, so work has just been tough. It's been hard. And so Lamech, when he has Noah, he tells him this is going to be the one that's going to bring relief to all the work that we had completed. Now, Noah lives about 950 years when he dies. He's most notable, of course, for building the ark, gathering of the animals, the annihilation of all existence through the great flood. He's going to father many children, but most notable are going to be Shem, Japheth, and Ham. Ham would later father a child named Canaan, which plays directly into the story of Noah. So Noah's story has an interesting introduction because he's not actually mentioned in it for like 6 verses. Or 7 verses. Instead, this is God. The first portion of the narrative is God looking down at what's been happening on the earth, and it says do I have it down here? He regrets. Let's look at chapter 6, verse 6. It says, "And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart." I'm sorry, I gave the different translation. But that doesn't mean that the creation was out of control, nor does it mean that God didn't know or that God hoped for something better but was unable to achieve it. God knew all along that this is how things would kind of turn out. But again, being a father, he's given many different avenues for people to continue to serve him, continue to worship him, and they just chose the wrong ones. So again, when you allow a child to make decisions, you're hoping for the best. You're hoping they're going to do the right thing. But if you always force them to do the right thing, they're always going to wait for you to give them direction. So here, God is he's sitting there and he's saying, I've given you the path. I've given you enough direction to live by. And he's hoping and he's looking at me saying, you have all these, but he knew how it was going to end up. And then chapter 6, verse 8, and I found this interesting because this is the first time Noah's mentioned. It says, "But then Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." And I find that interesting, so out of all of this evil and unrighteousness that plagues the earth, there's still someone that is seeking out after God, that stands out above all others, that God sees and says, I'm going to do something with. Now, remember on Sunday we talked about the small remnant of people that are left behind after God's judgment. And here it's very similar to this, because God sees Noah, he chooses Noah, and there's going to be a small remnant of people that are going to repopulate the earth, that are going to continue to build the earth. So out of all that evilness, he finds Noah. And in fact, in a few verses, Noah's going to be called righteous, a righteous man and blameless in his generation, in that he walked with God. Now, the Greek that's actually used there doesn't mean that he walked side by side with God. It's every step God wanted him to make, Noah made. That his walking with God was in spirit, so it's God wants him to do something, and Noah was already doing it. Then God asks Noah to build this ark. Now, it gives you the measurements in cubits, but I just kind of want to bring this out exactly how big this was. So it's 515 feet long, 86 feet wide, and 51 feet high. So there's a lot of people ask questions like, so were there giraffes on the ark? Yes, there were. And people are always in this assumption that, it wasn't tall enough. For the depictions we see look kind of smaller. I remember I had like a kid's adventure Bible when I was like 10 or 11. And the door that the people are knocking on to try to get in, it looks like the boat is probably just twice their size. This thing is massive. Then God, he says, put one giant door on the side. Now inside it had 3 decks. So the animals would be on the lowest deck. Their food and everything would be in the middle deck. And then Adam and his family would be living on the top deck. It only had 1 window. Then God makes this covenant or this agreement with Noah. He says, bring your wife, bring your sons, bring your sons' wives. And they're going to live on the ark during this period of judgment. But God instructs him to gather 2 of every living thing, that's 1 male, 1 female, a place in the ark to preserve the animal kingdom. So I love what people say, so what, he found 2 cockroaches? I don't know about you, but it just seems like you just can't get rid of those things once you got them. So I'm sure that when Noah's building these things, that things are in there. Yes, there are things that were on the ark. Everything that was there is still here today. So it kind of, everyone gets really caught up in a lot of these details of so he saved 2 ants. Okay, God made things happen. God made it happen the way it was. And you have to remember at this time in history, this is before God puts enmity between animals and humankind. So it's after the flood that God will change that in the animal kingdom or in their nature. But at this point, there's not, bears and stuff attacking mankind. They're not, jumping after them. They're not eating them. It's a peaceful place still that they're living. So yes, when people are like, so he had to get 2 lions, and how does a man get 2 lions without him eating them? Well, at this point, God has not put that inside of the animal nature. They're still relatively coherent. So after about 100 years, God then tells Adam he has 1 week to gather all these creatures and get his family on the ark before God unleashes the flood. And this water didn't just come from massive amounts in the rain. Now, again, I had kind of like a Sunday school mind melt from Adam and Eve. It kind of happened to me again, and I'll go over that in a second. But it says this in chapter 7, verse 11. It says, and on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heaven were opened. And it rained, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So the first thing that happens is it says water comes up from beneath. So during Hurricane Katrina, Louisiana saw 5 to 10 inches of rain with the swelling of the ocean. With their 5 to 10 inches of rain, with the swelling of the ocean, parts of New Orleans were under 15 feet of water. And that happened in 48 hours. So from the time that the levees began to break and the amount of water that was falling, as it rushed in, it was 48 hours from that time until the rain stopped. So it put an entire city under about 15 feet of water. Now, there are different measurements in different areas, because I read one that said that there was up to 30 feet, but I believe that was, those that were far below far below sea level. So I'm kind of using what they would consider was at sea level at that point, I guess. But just looking at kind of like the main metro city of New Orleans, and it was about 15 feet underwater. And it took 43 days for the water to recede. So I read something that a guy does this calculation of how much water it would take to cover the tallest mountain. And I really enjoyed the article because he takes the tallest mountain that we could go to, and he says for there to be enough water to cover that mountain, to have an 85-foot and he even did it displacement, like how much of the boat would be underwater. He's like, for that not to strike the mountain, and he's like, it would have to be 80 billion gallons of water that were on the earth to cover it. And again, I'm not saying it can't happen. God can do anything. But he's taking, this is how much rainfall we see. This is how much it goes. This is how much is in the ocean. And for them to swell up to that point, it's going to take all this water. And I really liked it because it was really amazing math. But I did a little of my own too and went through and kind of just showed some areas where we had some of the most massive flooding. And again, with New Orleans, with that breaking, with that happening, that's a natural disaster to a point that puts a city under 15 feet of water. So while it talks about on the greatest mountain, it doesn't mean the greatest mountain on the earth. I don't know. But what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the place that God would have had them in and saying, like, were they around the greatest mountains at that time? I'm not sure just what Noah and his family could see. They didn't see any mountains. And in their immediate area, there were no mountains. And this is a boat. This is relatively just following a current, right? It's not being propelled by any method. There were no sails on it. So it's basically just sitting there. They didn't have rows. So it's sitting there and it's just basically floating on the water at the whim of the current. So wherever they were going, whatever it was, God was doing it. But I look at this. In 1927, the Mississippi River flooded over 27,000 square miles of up to 30 feet of water at its deepest on land, and it took several months to recover before the water would recede. And that was just basically from groundwater, that was from snow that had fallen. So 40 days of torrential rainfall that adds to this great deep burst that comes from the ground. We can surmise that this means the ocean began to swell onto dry land so badly that it also would have been raising up from its faults, and that basically when it used that term bursts, it's meaning a sudden release as well, and that's even before the rain. So it says groundwater began to come up from under the earth. It began to burst forth, and there it goes. And what's funny is, as I was researching this, I also read an article. It's not a conspiracy theory in the sense that they're saying, there's a likelihood that there are deep pockets of water that are under, the earth's crust at certain levels, or like it's highly likely that they're there. So it is possible for water to come from under the ground. So the significance of that is that when heavy rain falls, where does it flow into? It flows into lakes, it flows into rivers, it flows into streams, but these were already overflowing and flooding, so it took 150 days for the water to begin to subside. When you do the math of how many days they're talking about when Noah's on the boat, it's about 150 days for the water to subside. Now, overall, Noah and his family and a menagerie of other animals and birds lived on the ark for over 8 months. So, although the waters began to recede after 150 days, they were still floating around and on that boat for 8 months. So they weren't completely gone. And then after 5 months, it says they began to see land. But it would take another 3 months for Noah to begin to test and see if it was safe enough to leave the boat. So 40 days after this meeting, it's now almost 9 months on the boat. He sends out a raven, and it doesn't even mention the raven coming back. And it doesn't mention how many times the raven goes out. He just says that he sends a raven and nothing. Then he sends a dove, and at first nothing. Then he sends the dove again in a week. And then the dove comes back with an olive branch, and he takes that as a sign and says that he's ready to go. But then Noah does this. Chapter 8, verse 12, it says, he waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again, but this time it didn't return to him. So he's already gotten confirmation that there are things that are growing, that they'll be able to sustain themselves on, an olive branch. So he knows that there's vegetation that's back on the planet, and he knows that there's dry land, but still he waits an additional 7 days. He's definitely a man of patience. He opens the door, he sees the land, And this is the very first thing that Noah does. Let's look at chapter 8, verse 20. It says, then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. That's another moment I kind of had to reread. That's where my Sunday school mind kind of like melted again. And I was like, wait. So he sent the raven out. He didn't get the raven back. So that means he only has one raven. He sent the dove out. The dove didn't come back. So it means he only has one dove. So he's killing, like, how do these species go around? And like my adult brain kicks in and is like, Pastor Will, I don't call myself Pastor Will in my head. That's just what I'm saying. But you have an entire animal kingdom cooped up on a huge boat, male and female, for almost 10 months. Of course, there's going to be more animals on the boat when you leave than when you brought on. Of course there would be. But like my mind was, I'm like, wait, because you always think that, like, even in my adventure book, I remember reading it, and it shows them, you know, the tigers going up, the bears, the lions, all those like going up 2 by 2 up the ramp. We all know what I'm talking about. And then on the one where they're coming out, it shows the same ones coming out, right? 2 by 2. So I guess in my mind, I'm like, yeah, they brought male and female out, and then all of a sudden, like, then they repopulate the earth. But when I read that, I'm like, wait, he's killing off species here. And then it hit, and I was like, of course there's more animals on the boat than you started with when you coop up a male and a female animal for 10 months. So I felt kind of dumb. But Noah opens the door, and the first thing he does is he worships and he sacrifices. And then look at the scripture in verse 21. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every incarnation of human heart is evil from childhood, and never again will I destroy all the living creatures as I have done. Noah's first actions after they get off of this boat cause God to create a covenant that says he'll never again curse the earth. He'll never again destroy all of mankind in that manner. Like he literally is telling that. And I mean, even look at the apocalypse, right? When we went through the book of Revelations, not everybody dies. It says a third will die, a third will die, a third will die. So it's not a third. That's three, you know, that's a whole one, Pastor Will. Everyone's dead. No, it's a third of what's left. So here, God creates this covenant. It says he will never again kill everything on it. Noah was basically the reset button, and he started it off in the right manner. He praised God, even though he'd been stuck in a boat that I'm sure smelled to high heaven. Because I mean, think about it. I went to the fair and I walked through the agricultural displays, like the cows and stuff, and I was smelling that for like a couple of days. I'm like, I had to keep showering because I'm like, why do I still smell it? And then so here Noah is on it for 10 months. They had to have some kind of cleaning schedule, but they're on it for 10 months. He doesn't come off and immediately just like start trying to rebuild things. He realizes what he needs to do first, and that is to bless God. And then I also found this interesting. Genesis 9:20, it says this: Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. Noah he invents the agricultural concept of the vineyard. He has a little problem though. He can't seem to put the cup down. He ends up getting drunk, and he ends up passing out in his tent. And then his youngest son walks in his tent, sees what's going on. He tells his older brothers, who they basically they don't want to shame their father. So it says that they basically get a piece of fabric and they walk backwards and then cover their father, and then they leave the tent. But then Noah wakes up, and it's interesting because there's a lot of debate as to what actually transpired within that tent between his younger son and himself, because he says what he did to me. So there's a lot of debate about that, and in all honesty, I'm like, look, it ain't mentioned, so I really it doesn't matter to me. It's just what happens after that. Chapter 9, verse 25. He said, "Cursed be Canaan." Now, this was Ham that did this, and he curses Canaan. The lowest of the slaves will he be to his brothers. Centuries later, God is going to honor this curse from Noah. God is honoring Noah by selecting Canaan, God selects the land of Canaan where the Canaanites lived. They called it Canaan and Canaanites because it was Canaan who founded the city. So God honors this by choosing the land of Canaan to give his people. This is what he would promise to Abraham and his descendants. This would come to pass with Israel conquering the land and living in this promise of milk and honey through the land of Canaan. So when it talks about the lowliest of his servants, it means they did all the work. And God's people just walk in and take it over. So Canaan built the city, they built the agriculture, they set Israel up for success, and God takes it away from them because Noah pronounced a curse upon him because of what his father did. And a lot of people bring this up and they're like, oh, it's the sins of the father on the son and all this. And you know what? Like, he chose Canaan because Ham was probably on his way out anyway. Ham's old, so is Abraham so is Noah at this point. But he tells him, cursed be Canaan, and God honors it. It takes a long time for God to honor it, but God still honors the curse that Noah pronounced on Canaan. So what can we learn from Noah? First is God knows you. Throughout all of the earth and all the evil and all this, God still knew Noah. He was still able to find Noah. Sometimes we can get caught up in a world that surrounds us and we can't see what others and we can see what others have and what they're doing and thinking that we're missing out on something. Our prayers, or maybe we think our prayers are going unnoticed, but God sees you, he hears your prayers, and he knows you as much as a father knows his children. Because God knew Noah could do this. God knew he wasn't tasking Noah with something that he knew Noah couldn't complete. He knew Noah could do this. He knew Noah would be able to get the animals. He knew he'd be able to get all the things to build the ark in the same measurements that he did. He knew he was smart enough to do it. He knew Noah, despite the evil going on all around him. Number two, no matter how long it takes, keep working towards what God told you to do. It takes a little over 100 years from the time that God tasked Noah with building the ark to the day that the rain began to fall. He's constructing this monstrosity for something that doesn't even look like it's going to happen. Now imagine Noah's doing this out in front of people. He's doing it where he lives. He's building it. I'm sure he has some kind of construction site set up. People are seeing this being built. And I'm sure when they go and they ask Noah, like, Noah, what are you doing? I'm building an ark at this measurement because God told me to, because he said he's going to flood the earth. And they're like, bro, we in a drought right now. What you thinking about a flood happening? But he still does it, despite what people are calling him. It's 100 years in the making. 100 years. If it's from God, keep working on it despite what you're hearing, because if God said it, it's going to happen. The third thing we can learn from Noah is patience. Even when Noah got the response he was wanting, he still waited. He waited for the confirmation. When he sent the birds out, he had an expectation of them to return with positive signs. At first he didn't. The second time he didn't. The third time he gets a positive result, but he still waits. See, you may see what you've been praying about, but you've got to be patient. It has to be God's timing. It could be from God, but it's coming. You may see it and say, oh, well, that's what God promised me, so I'm going to go and get it. Wait patiently, because if God has ordained it and said it's going to happen, you don't have to speed that timeline up. You just have to wait for the release from God to go and claim it. That's what Noah did. Noah sent it out and he got the result he wanted and still waited another 7 days. 7 pops up a lot in Noah's story. And again, we know it means complete, but at this point, I think he's really waiting for God to do something, and he would know, he does 7 days and he waits. Even when he can see what he wants, even when he knows it's out there, he still waits on God. He got the response he wanted, but he was waiting on God's response. It's right there. Wait for God to release it. And the last one that we can learn from Noah: bless the one who blesses you. Noah, after 10 months of what is most likely the worst cruise in recorded history, After 10 months, as soon as that door is open, the very first thing he does, which is a lot like tithing, right? He comes out and he gives the best of what he has in the boat, but he blesses God. And had he not done that, there's a high likelihood that God would have just wiped again. Think of Sodom and Gomorrah. He didn't destroy the entire earth. He didn't kill everyone that was on it. He just went after Sodom and Gomorrah. There were people traveling to and from those cities. God could have incorporated them inside that judgment as well, but he only takes out 2 cities. So at this point, God says, because of what Noah did, it pleased God. And it says, he says it in his heart, it's out of love. Never again am I going to destroy everything that lives on the earth. God would have never made this covenant with Noah had Noah not done things right. Now, we don't know, but we can say if Noah had started working first, he's not honoring God. And it isn't until after he does this that God begins to give them direction. So Noah gets out and he's like, I'm just going to worship God. I'm going to bless him. He brought us onto this place. He's brought us to where he wants us. God, thank you. And then it's only after that that God, number one, makes the covenant that he doesn't really tell Abraham about at that point, but then he starts to give them direction. Give your best to God when he blesses you. Most people, once they get what they want, they're gone. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen it in this church, but people pray and pray and pray. They dedicate their lives to God for a time period, and they sit there, and God begins to bless them and bless them and bless them. And then at a certain point, we don't see them come to church anymore. And then later on, you run into them out there, and it's like, oh, like, you know, oh, I miss you. I know, like, that job was great, right? And it's like, oh, I lost that job. And I'm like, oh, how's your wife? I'm divorced. How's the kids? They won't talk to me. How's the cat? Eaten by the dog? How's the dog? Choked on the cat? Like, it just, everything from that standpoint, when I've met with these people, it just seems like everything began to fall apart once they separated. Yeah, because you have to take care of the blessing that God has given you, and you use it to bless God back. Now, he's like, hey, yo, tithe is there. Tithe is a requirement. You know, that's part of what we do as our covenant to God. But at this point, Noah's just like, I'm just going to bless God because you brought us to this place. You brought us to this land, and I'm going to bless you. Give your best to God when he blesses you, because your offering to God today will be recognized and cherished by God to a point that he continues to bless the family and your descendants, all because you were faithful and you blessed God when he blessed you. And I wholly believe that the blessings that have come on my life have come from my parents being so faithful. And at times where they had more than they needed, they still continued to bless God. They still continue to do things. And I know that where I'm at in life and the blessings that God has brought, I know that they play a part in that simply because they made that covenant with God to say that regardless of what we're in life, in the good and the bad, we're still going to stay faithful. We're still going to give. We're still going to do this. And when we have more, we're going to give more. And I think that's one of the most amazing things that we can see in a Christian's life is the dedication to say, like, God blessed me with more than I needed. God blessed, he might have blessed you with more than you wanted. And most people just say, like, okay, it's kind of that spirit where we take it in, we say, okay, God gave it to me. No, God gave it to you to manage. And the only thing that he says is exactly what Noah did. As soon as he got what he needed, as soon as he got what God had promised him, he still blessed God. He still came out and he blessed him. So that's Noah. We'll continue to go through these. I think we'll come. I don't know who we'll do next. I don't want to jump around. I kind of want to stay linear, but we'll figure it out. But we love you guys. We thank you for tuning in tonight. Remember, you can continue to give your Easy Tithe. You can find that in the Apple Store or in Google Play. You can also go to easytithe.com, search Praise Chapel Fresno. You'll see which one you can give on. You can go to praisechapelfresno.com, click Give on the menu bar. It's going to take you to a third-party website, safe to give on. If you're joining us on our in-person services, we have our offering envelopes behind each and every chair with our tithes and offerings box located just outside the sanctuary for you to drop it off in. If you're joining us on our online services only, you can mail in and drop off your tithes, your offerings, your love gifts. We'll get them deposited in a timely manner. You don't know our address, just Google Praise Chapel Fresno, California, and it'll show our address. You can mail it in. Don't forget, keep texting people, keep hitting them up, keep getting them into church. It's working. God is moving. Bring people to the fire. Don't let them just watch from afar. Bring them to the fire and let God just begin to ignite their hearts, their souls, their minds, and just get a group of people, a small remnant of people that are here to move to the kingdom of God. But that small remnant has to begin to reach out and grow. And we do that via our texting, hitting them up on Facebook, Instagram, giving them our YouTube link, our church link. We're seeing our website kind of getting a lot of looks right now, so I appreciate those that have been sending it out. Got people telling me, I'm telling my brother to watch you. I'm telling this, I'm telling that. They live in San Bernardino. This person lives here. So it's great that we're doing that, but get those people that are directly next to you. Get on them. They're the ones that you're going to have the biggest impact on. Like those, don't get me wrong, I love having the ability to stream this out so people can get the word of God and get the truth. But there is nothing like getting next to the fire and feeling what God is doing rather than watching it from afar and saying, hey, that looks cool. So we love you guys. We'll see you guys Sunday, whether in person, 10 a.m. or live casted at 10 a.m. We love you. We'll see you then.